Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox, where we talk about all things Xbox from the original to the Series X. And today we are talking about an original Xbox game, the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was released on Xbox, PS2, PC, DS, GameCube, Game Boy, so many consoles in 2005 to coincide with the release of the Disney movie with the same name, which is based off of a book of the same name by C.S. Lewis. And this comes from a time when almost all new movie releases, especially for kids, had video games tied to them. We still get that sometimes nowadays, but if you go back to this era, there are a ton. And this one drew me to it just because of the developer, and that's Traveler's Tales, and this was published by Buena Vista Games. But Traveler's Tales, at the time, had been getting into their Lego franchise, slowly making more and more of those games, and you can definitely tell that here with the Chronicles of Narnia. So this is an action game where you play as certain characters and you traverse different levels, which is mainly just scenes from the movie. And what's funny about some movie games at this time is that they would just throw in scenes from the movie into the game, and this is one of them. So you get a lot of clips from the movies, and I actually had not seen this movie since maybe when it was new in the theater. I did revisit it after I beat this game, and yeah, it was kind of crazy that the video game was just scenes from the movie, and when I rewatched the movie, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just watching it again. So it does offer a nice condensed version, so if you are a fan of the movie or the book, it's kind of a nice offering, I guess, to be able to explore some of these areas and scenarios, because this is very high fantasy, very interesting world. I don't think the movie is amazing, but it's fine, and I think the world building in it offers itself something interesting to work into. And I think that's where I like this game the most, is in its setting. So it is sectioned off level by level with usually a movie scene playing, and then you'll get to play the next section of the movie. And it looks nice. The snowy world looks really good, and later on when the snow melts and you go into these grand war battlefields, those look really good. I think character models look pretty good. There are certain assets that I think are a little funky, like there's coins on the ground, and those look like something out of like a PS1 Nintendo 64 game. And then the portraits on the left-hand side are just cut out pictures of the actors, and the background kind of bleeds through them. It's a little ugly, but otherwise I think this game looks pretty strong. I think they probably worked under a heavy time crunch for this one, and what we got, at least looks-wise, is pretty solid. And it plays pretty well too. I think Traveler's Tale had realized that they had an award-winning combination with the Lego Star Wars games, and they were like, okay, let's transfer that over here. So you get to play 4 of the siblings, usually in each level. Sometimes if they're split away from each other, it'll be just 2 of them. Each of them having their own sort of powers, where the oldest brother is really good at fighting, and the little girl can get into tiny crevices that no one else can get into. Which is just like in the Lego games, where you have different types of characters that can do different types of things. You can swap between them with left and right trigger. And it's going to give you a lot of puzzles tied to just swapping between everybody or just fighting enemies. And I think this game starts out really strong with some of these levels. Like the very first level, whenever the fighter planes are over you and you have to escape with everybody out of the building, and everybody gets to use their abilities to kind of push heavy objects, or the oldest sister uses her flashlight to find certain items. It feels really good. There is just some issues with a lot of the later levels. I think as this game goes on, the more tedious it gets, which is really surprising because this game took me maybe a little over 4 hours to beat, which is relatively short. But God, there are some awful levels in this game. One specifically that comes to mind is there's one where you follow a beaver, and the beaver has to eat through a dam in order to escape. So you have to wait for him to finish that. And over the next 15 to 20 minutes, you have to go between killing wolves, and then once you kill them, you go back and you kill some goblins that are pushing a rock. And then while that's usually happening, the beaver gets kidnapped. So after you finish that, you have to get the beaver, and then just repeat those 3 steps over and over and over again. I was so tired of that level by the end of it, and there's a few levels like this. Some of these action levels where it's just asking you to sit on a timer and just attack just gets really boring and tedious. I would much prefer some puzzle, Lego action solving. I think that's where this game was the strongest, and there are some wave-based fighting levels that just go on for way too long, and they're just a little too boring. And then when you sit in these levels, I think that's when you start to realize some of the flaws of this game. One of the worst offenders of this is the music. So the music is fine itself, it's just kind of cuts from the movie, but the looping job on it is some of the worst I've ever heard on the Xbox. The whole song plays like maybe a minute segment, then it'll be silent for about 2 seconds, and then just reset again. So instead of just being one continuous loop of music, you have to sit there in silence and then just hear it restart, which is really just weak game design. I don't know how whoever made the music for this, why they had such trouble looping the tracks properly. And also there were some camera issues where the camera would swap to a different position and kind of mess with your controls a little bit, and that was a little bit annoying. And now I have been dogging this game for a little bit. I will say it does at least play well, and I do think some of the level design is pretty good, and if you like that Lego style of game, I think you will appreciate it. And I think this is a solid little game for kids. I don't think anybody at my age about to hit into their 30s is really going to love this game unless they have some kind of nostalgia tied to it, which I don't really. So it's kind of like a mixed bag in the end. You get a solid movie-based game with, the story of the movie. You get clips, and they're a little low quality, but you do get clips of the movie, and some levels are solid, some levels are awful. So it's not the kind of game that I'm willing to go back to. I'm happy that I played it, and it is something that I could recommend to people that like the movie. But as far as the console version of this goes, I'm not going to recommend any collector with no nostalgia tied to it to pick this one up. It's kind of just a lackluster experience at the end of the day. And as far as my ranking list goes, this does go towards the bottom. As of all the games I've reviewed now, it is number 28 on the list, which is the second from the bottom. I do think it is a much better game than Dangerous Hunts. It's much better put together, and it's actually, it's somewhat fun to play. But Arctic Thunder does go above it because I think Arctic Thunder is a much more maybe polished experience than Narnia. But I do think that wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed this game back in the day, or if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Also, you can let me know if you outright hated this game. But you can also like and subscribe to the channel. But I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.